We are live. Hello, hello. Once again, my name is Steve Giguere. With me, as always, is Mike Foster. This is your cloud native video newsletter for your impatient world, where we distill all the best curated content from throughout the week or since our last show, depending on what it is. All about security, Kubernetes, cloud native, big acquisitions in this space, and stuff that just makes you go, what? And generally, a deep technical dive into some form of cloud native technology.
Yeah, and luckily you have 2x, well, not x, 1x, one current StackRox StackRox employees. So we're going to be deep diving into the open source release of StackRox, talking about all the good, the bad, maybe some ugly, the usual stuff. We're going to talk about everybody getting fired for screwing up on the job. I guess a lot of cybersecurity issues are popping up and people are getting laid off. So that's how I'm going to phrase it, Steve.
Okay.
And lastly, we're going to be talking KubeCon. This is the final episode of season 1, version 1. So we're going to talk KubeCon, lead up to it, talk about what we're excited to see, and hopefully come back after KubeCon with a bunch of great news. Thanks for joining. Yes.
I feel like we already need a disclaimer.
Should we? We can get a little caption at the bottom, disclaimer. Hey, this is what's going on. What would the disclaimer say, Steve?
Didn't we used to have a disclaimer? I don't know if it's still here. It's not the one I want to do this time, though. The one I'm doing this time is because the way we said, ex-StackRox employee, and I jokingly said soon to be ex-StackRox employee, because we're about to do a review of a StackRox product. And then you went straight into, and we're going to talk about how people lose their jobs because of cybersecurity mistakes.
Yeah, this one, hopefully that doesn't happen. But, you never know what you're going to get on this show. We definitely need a banner to tell people to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you get notified when we go live. And you can always check our show out on YouTube if you missed it, and the links are in the description. As always, thanks for joining again, Steve. What do you got going on in your life?
Life. Yesterday I went to London and did a talk about my life, my favorite subject, me, in front of what I thought was going to be, my brain, my aged brain. Oh, some kids who are graduating and going into the wild world of tech. No, that wasn't it. It was people retraining into the wild world of tech. Not all kids, all ages, all sizes, all shapes, all geographies, diversities. It was like, oh, everybody's here. There was a woman who was a former bus driver who was there. It was super cool to see these people and hear a little bit about some of their experiences on the way to tech and why they were trying to get into it. And so I had to give them some little hot takes and tips on here's the LinkedIn game. Here's how this works. Here's what you should put on your CV. Don't be afraid to apply for jobs you're barely qualified for. They're an exaggeration. Mm-hmm. Like all sorts of all sorts of things. And don't be afraid to interview for fun. Apply for a job, you know, do a little exaggerating here and there on your CV, you know, and just get some interview experience before you get to the one you want. Don't walk in yet. It was good. It was really good. And by the time it was done, it was like one of the few talks I've ever done where I actually thought the audience really appreciated it. Yeah, I've maybe had some less successful talks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, nobody creates roadmaps for this kind of stuff, especially I think people, if they miss it in college, they think the ship has sailed. That's 100% not true. So is there a recording up?
It is recorded. It went on Eventbrite. I can find out where that landed. So it was recorded for sure. But yeah,
I'm sure
it would be good.
We'll see it on LinkedIn again in the future. So
well, they take other people. I think you would be a good one because they do virtual as well. So you know, they said, "Do I know anybody with a strange path into tech?" And I'm like, most people I know have a strange path, particularly into cyber.
Definitely.
So cool, yourself?
Cool. No real talks, just StackRox open source has been the biggest thing. And, you know, it's just making fixes, readmes, all that stuff. Looking forward to your feedback so that I can do more of that in the coming weeks.
Alrighty.
Without further ado, should we get into the general news?
Smash it.
All right.
We jumping straight into our picks?
Yeah, sure. For a little background, KubeCon EU is coming up. It is in Valencia, and I believe, what are the dates? The 10th to the 15th?
It's very, very small over here, but
or 15th to 20th. Apologies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sunday's the registration, and 20s just go away. But that's the idea. First 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, are generally seem to have become these what used to be day 0, and now they just went, forget it. It's day 1 and 2. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah. And so it's all these interesting other alternatives: eBPF Day, Telco Day, WASM Day, Security Con, Fluid Con. Oh my goodness. And then day 2 said unique industry and technology focused events. And then we get into it. You can see the big schedule here. It's long. Look at the size of this thing.
And now I picked all of my sessions from KubeCon and KubeCon only. I don't know.
Good.
I took some other ones.
Yeah, I took one out of the secure Con. I'm trying to get a ticket to it. So blag to get in there. Because I know the guy who's doing the talk. I know his experience, and actually I think it'll be really good. So I'm going to call it out.
All right, cool. Do you want to go one for one, or you want to start it off and just list all 5?
You go. Do you want you go first? List all 5.
Sure. So number 1, I had, and this is in no particular order, I was just going through reading some stuff, but Hitchhiker's Guide to Pod Security, specifically the new admission controller. Want to see some use cases. Want to see what, is it Lackland? I'm assuming Evanson has for the use cases, you know, especially when it comes to, I guess, sort of the hard enforced versus the open admission controller and everything in between. Very interesting to check out for me. Second one I have is Bypassing Falco, How to Compromise a Cluster Without Tripping the Sock. And that's by Shay Berkovich from BlackBerry, which I thought was crazy. BlackBerry, look at that. They make a run on stock last year, and then all of a sudden they can get into KubeCon. The BlackBerry stock last year, they were part of the whole GME craze. So doing some cool stuff. Number 3, Securing Your Container Native Supply Chain with Salsa, GitHub, and Tekton by Laurent Simon and Priya Wadhwa from Google. I think the Salsa framework is really cool. I like how it breaks it down into the smallest unit of basically, you know, code, dependency, some sort of build process, and then some output that's consumable. Really cool. They have like level 1 to level 4 in terms of securing that process. We should actually probably talk about that at some point on the show.
We should actually, yeah.
Yeah, and after KubeCon, we'll bring it up. Number 4, I have This Is the Way, a crash course on the intricacies of managing CPUs in Kubernetes. And that's a hell of a title, but I think it's extremely useful just because I constantly get these pings of, hey, does this application really need this much CPU? You know, how do you throttle it? When to scale up? When not to? You know, how do you set a hard stop on certain resources? Very interesting. So I want to hear. And of course, that's my default Red Hat and Intel shout out. So a little cross collaboration there in the business unit. And then number 5, I have securing Shopify's software supply chain, Shane Lawrence, staff infrastructure. That's my big keynote. Sorry, I took it from you. I think Spotify always has some great talks. One of my favorite ones was the IAC one where they dropped they destroyed 2 of their production clusters, and Spotify still ran. So looking forward to seeing that. They always bring some very entertaining talks.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, like there's a series of keynotes every day that are all clustered together. Some of them seem a little bit salesy. Some of them seem a little bit. I've watched the keynotes before and just kind of snoozed. And it is funny that independently we got to this conversation and we both had this one, the Shopify one, in our list. Mm-hmm. So that is
all the sessions.
Of all the orange sessions, we both said, yeah, that's definitely going to that one. Mm-hmm. So cool. Excellent. And that's your last one, right? So I can start with that one.
Yep. And I'll be up real early for that one, I think.
Yeah, that's 4 a.m. Thankfully, I will be there. And I will be entertaining myself throughout the thing. Bridge Crew's got me running around doing what I did at AWS reInvent. So just trying to get a behind the scenes live thing. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but that's the plan, whatever that means. My other ones, though, let's do this. All right. Bing bong. Right at the end of Thursday. Threat modeling Kubernetes. I always find this very difficult, and Louis Denham Perry from Control Plane, a friend, is one of the brains behind the CTF for Kubernetes, right? And a lot of that brains comes from their research and their influence in threat modeling Kubernetes. So I've never seen this talk, and I think it would be very cool to go check that one out. It's something that we don't talk about very often. So I like that one. And then, think about this. Trampoline Pods. Now this is like you had a shout out, right? To Red Hat. This is my little shout out to Yuval, principal researcher at Palo Alto Networks. Today, I actually reviewed his pull request into Checkoff, which is a result of this research of this talk, which is essentially talking about RBAC within Kubernetes and privilege and all sorts of. He's done all sorts of really great work, and on the way in, he worked out all sorts of like mad things that this title is complicated enough that it doesn't do it justice how interesting this will be. So I hope he gets a crowd, or in a way, I hope I'm the only one there.
I'll definitely make sure I check it out.
The other one I had was at the same time as your Falco one, is the seeing is believing debugging with ephemeral containers, because kind of like, I think we both had a little bit of like, am I going to use that ephemeral container questioning? Have we introduced a new attack vector? I don't know. But there you go. Perfect title. Seeing is believing. All right. Okay, Aaron. I'm going to be there to from
Make me a believer.
Make me a believer. And then the last one, which I realized just by not putting it on here, because it's in, does these click through? Because if they do click through, then I can get the other schedule. Otherwise, I'll just tell you what it is. Oh, schedule. Hello, please be there. No, it takes me back to the same schedule. The navigation here drives me nuts. It's that Skidge program.
The drop down can be annoying too. You click on the wrong links all the time.
Oh yeah, it does this, and you go down, and then it disappears, and you end up clicking the one underneath it.
Yeah,
it's bonkers. All right, well, I'll just tell you what it is. It's in the Cloud Native Security Con Europe, and it is on, I believe it's on the first day. It's Aran Bibi from Firefly. Aran used to be the guy I would refer to as Brent from the Phoenix project at Aqua Security. He worked at Aqua Security, and he created the most complicated combinations of GitOps infrastructure as code. Like the entire DevOps infrastructure was built by him. And his talk is called Lessons Learned from Writing Thousands of Lines of IAC.
That's pretty cool.
I'm like,
I want to
I
learn
want
from that. Yeah.
I want to see that. Yeah, I want to see that because that for me is completely worthwhile. That is unfortunately hidden away in the Cloud Native Security Con Europe. If you can get into that additional fee required, that is not inexpensive. But if you are from a company, get them to buy it. If you care about security, looks like the conference itself actually looks like a lot of the good security. There's a lot of good security content.
Yeah, they did I don't know how many people submitted, but I think that the breadth of the discussion and all the different topics is really well chosen for the security tract.
Totally. And it's like every year when I get rejected, I wait for this list to come out so I can go, aha, you see, mine would have been good. And then I look at the list and go, yeah, no, I'm cut. Crap. I write and try and get feedback. I'm like, what could I do better? It's like, I could just be better. That's the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. We should create a little catalog Excel sheet of the things that we want and write our notes down. Me and you. For the people. Thoughts?
Okay.
Anyways.
For the peeps.
Yeah. Right. Moving on. We have two new tools that I found. The first one is a Kubernetes Controller. It dropped and I came across this, found it was really interesting for a namespace suspender. And now I wouldn't really recommend this in any sort of test or production cluster. I think it's really useful for maybe some data science teams, your development clusters. You're on the cloud, you're in Kubernetes, you install this thing and you can say, hey, when I'm not using this, I want this to auto scale down, right? So we've seen things like KubeCon come around, and I just saw this and thought it was pretty interesting. The function is, although very small, useful for the small teams who want to scale down and keep their cloud costs low. Have you get a chance to look at this, Steve?
Like a half an hour ago. But it's this will be the theme of the show, is that Foster created most of the show, and I'm going to be I will be doing the reaction video simultaneously.
Very nice. Yeah, so it's you get your video and your reaction video all in one, so you don't have to go to separate videos on YouTube. Look at that.
It's double the value here.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because it only scales down. It doesn't scale up.
Yeah.
So if you want to set a time, you can say, hey, I want you to scale down every day during the week at 9 p.m. and it will auto scale down to 0. The only issue is you have to remember to auto scale it back up. So I can see somebody scaling it down and somebody showing up sick and forgetting to auto scale it up, and some developer getting pissed. But,
so I'm going to sound like a total moron because I have never. Well, I want to know what's the equivalent of scaling. What's the command line kubectl equivalent of scaling down a namespace?
Scale replicas to 0.
Replicas of a namespace?
So I think what it does is it looks at all of the resources that are in the namespace and then just runs those commands. So like if it sees deployments or if it sees a replica set in the namespace, it will just make all of the replica sets scale to 0. That's pretty much all that I think is going on in the background. And then there's a little bit of fancy like input cron job setup.
Right.
But my guess is basically all it's doing is it's an operator. It goes into the operator namespace. It runs like a cron job. If you set it to do something, it goes and pings. Yeah, it'll go and ping the Kubernetes API and say, hey, we want to scale all the replicas in this namespace to 0. And we don't want to allow anything new to pop up in that namespace too, right?
Got it.
So it just sits there and kind of monitors.
That's funny. Gotta hope you're not like, I wonder if it would freak out if you're running like Argo or Flux or something and it goes, whoa, where did they go? Boom, 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 boom. Yep. Destroyed. Boom, destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder what takes precedent. So
yeah, it would just put in this vicious cycle of creation destruction until morning.
For sure. And then all of a sudden you come back on the weekend and your cloud cost is insane because all your resources are fighting each other. Hey, that happens. Yeah. That's how you get these ballooned cloud costs with auto scaling, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Second one was one that came across my radar. Hadn't had too much time to look into the project, but I understand what they were going for here. And it's Packet Streamer. So it's a distributed packet capture for cloud native platforms. They kind of took a shot at eBPF, saying eBPF doesn't scale. Why network capture?
Really?
They did a little bit if you read the
Yeah.
the
Okay.
example why network capture there. Tools such as Sysdig Falco capture TTP signals from running workloads and give indications of local compromise, but the signals alone are only a late stage story. That's a fair argument because you're doing runtime enforcement / runtime capture with Falco, but the packet's already been received. So you're saying that you want a network capture at the front, you get a quicker alert. But really at the same time, you're only as good as your enforcement mechanisms, right? Like, yeah, you could get a couple milliseconds before some sort of alert. But anyways, they make a good case. I think it's pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to following this project. You can check out Deep Fence Packet Streamer on GitHub. And they kind of go into what you can do with it as well.
So aren't they a little bit, what do you think? Aren't they being a little bit waffy?
Yeah.
Like, that's without saying, do they say WAF anywhere? It seems very waffy.
Yeah, I think when you're getting into like layer 7 and packet capture, integration, especially like if you're talking Istio or Jaeger or things like that, those are very CPU heavy intensive processes, especially when they're not set up for very specific use cases, right? Which is why a lot of security programs don't really like you don't have layer 7 and stuff like that built into most security platforms. It's kind of an extension, or it's an extra service that's an add-on. There's a reason why they're productized as an extra and not built into the security platform. So I think what I'm interested in is if you can get something that's lightweight, that's easy to use, where it's like, hey, I only want to packet capture this specific thing, and I can take that information and redirect it into a UI like Grafana or something like that. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I have yet to see something that is a packet capture that doesn't bog down my system.
Yeah, hell yeah. I don't see, then I start thinking of Cilium.
Yep.
Cilium's using eBPF, and it would probably be capable of doing what this is doing. Well, it's kind of there. There's a allow deny BPF filter right there on this diagram.
Yeah, and that's why I thought it was really interesting. So Cilium would obviously be the alternative to this. They went at Falco because Falco basically takes all that and then enforces. And so I think that they're trying to just enforce they're trying to enforce at the gate instead of like letting in and then kicking the barbarians out after, right?
Right. All right. I like it.
Anyways.
I mean, it's the world needs competition. So this is, wow, this is super new. Look at this.
Yeah.
6 days ago. Okay. All right. Let's give this some love and see where we can go with it.
I did my best.
Yeah, nice. I think it's pretty cool. All right. I'm not going to heckle it too hard.
Now, technically I put this in general news, but I think it deserves a WTF. So we're gonna move on to the next section. People are getting fired.
25% of workers lost their jobs in the past 12 months after making cybersecurity mistakes. 25% of what workers?
Yeah. So there's two things I don't really like about this article. Is one, the company who created it, Tessie in there, they're a people security company. So they push like, oh, we do education for your employees. They're very human centric, and that's the product they sell. So that's their pitch, right? Is a lot of people are sending improper emails, that sort of thing. I also think that security gets a bad rap because companies will lean on security mistakes as a reason to get rid of employees they don't want, let's say.
Yeah.
I guess, let's say you're maybe inconsiderate with some things that you're sending, and then you send the wrong email to somebody. It's like, oh, security lapse. Like, now I have an excuse, right? But again, they found some key survey findings. 2/5 of employees sent an email to the wrong person. Almost 1/3 saying the business lost a client or customer because of an error. I've seen things like shared screens, Slack messages, right? Slack pop-ups on screens. That stuff happens all the time. One of the reasons why I have multiple screens. Slack messages only come on the laptop, so you never have to worry about that stuff. Also, very quickly, did you see how quickly Google built the share tab functionality in after COVID happened? Because it used to be always share screen or share window, and then very quickly it became, oh, share this tab, because I don't want you to see all my tabs in my browser.
No, right? I know. You could probably see all my tabs on the screen here.
Yeah, I got blogs and things like that I'm working on. You can see the title. So,
it was very clever.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and this is not going to be the first thing.
Still doesn't
As
say
we,
of what workers. Of
yeah,
all workers in the world? That's kind of what
of the workers. So I'm guessing what they did is they went and said who lost their job in the past 12 months, and it's self-reported, right?
Oh,
And then
right,
it's like,
right,
what was
right.
the reason that you were given for being laid off?
Right. And they've said, aha, that matches the blog article we want to write.
Yeah, but I'm also curious because if they're a tech company, they probably send it to people who work in tech companies. I don't think they went to the local grocery store and asked them.
No,
But
I'm
anyways,
gonna go with no. Excellent.
Speaking of local grocery store, the next one's pretty funny.
Is this it?
Yeah. Well, actually,
Stress.
yeah, we have back-to-back ones. I was thinking of the Target one that's coming up next, but
Yeah, that's next. We have more stress. Stress prompts employees to break cybersecurity policies. There's a lot more than stress prompting employees to do that, but what's the central under stress? The relatively benign breaches are far more likely on days when employees are suffering from stress. This is probably true, though, right?
I think security timelines, people normally get stressed when there's some sort of timeline or an action that needs to be taken in a certain amount of time and they're feeling pressure on something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Security creates hurdles. So naturally, you're going to want to avoid those hurdles. You're going to have to break cybersecurity rules to deliver on things, right? I mean, this article is just stating the obvious reaction to why security is considered a cost center in most businesses, right?
Nice. That was a good philosophy on that for sure. And I think when you say stress, right, you think, oh, stress. But the reality is anything that is inconvenience is stress, whether it be intrinsic or extrinsic issues on your cognitive load, then just the fact that come on, I want to do this thing. All right, I'll give you some privilege. I don't want to go
human reaction to external factors prompting you to action, I think.
Yeah.
I'll go with that definition.
I think that's
hey, my boss says I need you to change this one thing on the webpage. It's like, I don't know if I should. Maybe I should ping somebody first. He's like, I need this done by tomorrow. All right. And then I'm sitting there going to sleep like, did I just screw up? Am I going to get fired like the last 25% of people from the previous article? Yeah,
nice.
It's typical stress. These are wide-ranging impacts, right? I mean, it's different if you screw up at a local grocery store and you have to have a refund. It's a lot different when some data gets exposed or something like that to possibly millions of people, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The level of stress is hard to fathom for a lot of people.
I think I
think the equivalent would be like you're in a broadcasting booth and you have the live air button and it's like, no, we don't touch that button, right? That's an off limit button.
Yeah.
You get really scared for that one thing, right? All right. And speaking of, back to the grocery store thought.
Right.
This is Target's security vulnerability reporting policy. And if you read it, it basically says that if you come across any vulnerabilities that they may have, if you don't submit the information in the way that they deem useful and proper, that you could be sued.
It's a bit of a stick over a carrot.
Yeah. So anyways, nobody's going to report anything to you, Target. Maybe try a bounty.
That would be better, right?
Yeah.
It's the instead of bug bounty, we have the bug lawsuit.
Yeah.
And then this inviting report of vulnerability.
Yeah. The only people that you're going to get are people with no money or masochists that report to you, Target. So
that is just fantastic. Where did you find this one?
This one came across my radar. I think it was Reddit.
It's always Reddit.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It did. It came across Reddit and then it got sent to me like an hour or two later, right after it popped up. But I thought it was hilarious. That's a true WTF. Yeah. Come on, Target.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. All right. Way to contribute back to stress prompts employees, people losing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Great themed WTF section today.
Yeah, we got one more, and this was also prompted partially because I had dinner with my father last night, and
Yeah.
he might be the one person watching. Who knows? Or probably it's Waleed.
Other than Waleed.
But he came over, and I looked at his iPhone, and there's like thousands of apps that are unused on the iPhone, and I'm like, don't you delete them? Don't you do like a regular cleanup? And what I found interesting is this Android application package kit. Basically, when you are downloading a couple applications, you could download this by accident, or it could be put on your computer, but it looks like it's like a settings app. It displays itself like it's a setting app, asks for all these permissions, and then sets up a server to watch it. But what's also crazy is it's not hidden. Like if you look at it, it shows up as an app. It shows that it's running in the background, and yet it still works on people. And I was just thinking, like, the more refined your process, I shouldn't say refined, the less apps, the more you have a default behavior that you use your phone with, the more likely something like this is going to stand out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm very minimalist. I use the usage time like every month, and if I haven't used an app that month, it's wiped off the phone.
Here's a question. Can you delete things off the phone from the usage menu? That would be cool.
I'm not sure.
It would be good. Like it's probably an app that has too many permissions, but something that just automatically popped up and said, you haven't used this in freaking ages. Can we just kill it? That'd be a good cleanup.
Yeah. I know like Instagram and Twitter, it will show you haven't interacted with these accounts. Do you want to get rid of them? And I'm like, yes, that would be great.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't need to follow this stuff. I don't need their ads popping up, right?
Nope.
So yeah, it would be a great feature. Cool. Anyways, that clean up your phones, because also I have OCD, and some of the people, it's like nobody learned how to structure files properly.
My phone would drive you nuts. I have an iPhone and I have like 10,000 apps on it. And sometimes I'm like, oh crap, I need this app to do this thing. And I go to the app store and it's like, oh, I have it?
Yeah.
And I don't know where anything is. I just use search.
And I find that the less apps I have, the more accurate Siri is with recommendations. So it's the point where I get in a car, it's like Siri knows I'm going to the gym because I go at this time. Right there. So
nice
perks.
Perks.
All right.
Lesson learned.
Let's
talk about the money.
It's all money.
All right, finally, Docker gets a break. 105 million Series C and a 2 billion unicorn valuation. We need a unicorn klaxon as one of our...
A unicorn just morphing into a donkey.
Something, or just like a horse with a carrot on its head, just kind of kicking off somehow. But yeah, I stuck this in here, one of my few contributions to the show. Yay. Because I thought of all of the things we put on this show, we whip through Series C's and A's and B's. Like it seems like every week there's another ridiculous series. And it's like, wait, Docker only just got its series. How did I just launch the exact same thing twice? Only just got Series C? And also then I thought, why? As it says here, it sold its enterprise business a while ago. So what is Docker doing? I think you had a theory that it was services perhaps, or?
Yeah, because they're focusing on the developer platform, because really that is containers. That's the best use case for containers. But then there's also so much in-house knowledge, right? About the platform itself, how to operate it, how to do it at scale. So I figured that they could have some sort of consulting service as well in the background, or some, where they're selling to developers, but then also coming in and educating after. Like it's probably a little bit of a tiered, or like multiple product offerings. The CEO actually had a pretty good breakdown, because he said, this is a 2-year process that they've been sitting on. So they had a little bit of extra funding from the sell-off, and they pivoted, and they were waiting for the return. And 2 years later, They 50 million in ARR after restructuring.
It's good
So
stuff.
I also think that they're probably highly tuned in with the Docker founders, Dagger IO as well. I would not be surprised if you're, because really, if we're talking about development platforms, specifically containers, I know Rancher's pivoting a little bit into that space as well, but Docker still takes the cake for developer functionality, right?
Totally.
It is the go-to. It makes sense. They're going to stay on that platform. They're going to continue to just pivot into the developer space, and especially with Kubernetes basically deprecating it, the shim, and people moving to Containerd, it's going to become basically the, let's say, developer and pipeline runtime engine, if I can say it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough. On I think a more humorous note too on here, I think it was Justin Cormack tweeted this and said, "Hey, look at this. We got all this money, but we must definitely send a new photo for Docker to them because apparently this is a defunct office from the San Francisco Docker era from some time ago. So don't go looking for this office." Excellent.
Geek Masher posted. I just saw in the chat. he, I said it in about 100 words. He said it in 8. So
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
yeah, pretty good.
All right, we only had one big spender this month.
One big spender. Now we're into the vulns.
Now what starts with the letter C?
Boom. GitLab critical security release. Several. Community edition and enterprise edition. Hit me with these ones.
There's a bunch. They had been sitting on these. It was a security specific update. This is basically just to tell you to update GitLab, your community edition and your enterprise edition. If you have it, do it. Because if you scroll down, you'll see some of the major exploits. They're all listed there. Static passwords inadvertently set during Omni-Auth-based registration, stored XSS in notes, right? Like these are some pretty troublesome issues. Geek, well, that doesn't surprise me. Yes, GitLab has been known to have some issues. It is one of my favorite tools, though. So
yeah,
it really hurts the security in me. But yeah, update it.
Oh, cool.
And yeah,
okay.
This is from GitLab too, which I actually respect. It's hey, here's all the issues that we worked on. Here's their severity. Do it all in one big patch. Because of multiple little patches also kind of scare people away from security updates as well, right? If you're constantly pushing something out every week, it's like another update, what? So, yeah,
check it out. So that
very cool.
HackerOne doing okay.
Yeah.
After off of this, oh, there we go again. Ding. Okay, awesome. Geez. Well, there we go. Pays to be working for HackerOne.
And we talked about them on the show, right? Getting funding.
Yeah.
Geek says no love for GitHub. No, a lot of GitHub. I was actually very surprised with how Microsoft handled GitHub. I'm pleasantly surprised. Steve, I think we've talked about them on the show too, right?
Yeah, we have definitely. Yeah. I actually, we're going off track. I spoke to the GitHub team at the last conference I was a few weeks ago and said, "How's it going?" Because it's a guy I'd known for like 3 years, and he goes, "No, it's like," and we compared notes because it's like my bridge crew experience at Palo Alto. They just leave us alone. So, you get way more money and clout, and you just keep doing your thing. So
yeah, a little bit bigger of a marketing budget, pretty much, and
yeah.
GitHub Actions has come a long way. My biggest thing, and I always say this, the differentiation between GitLab and GitHub is the way GitLab manages project spaces versus organizations in GitHub.
True. I can see.
All right.
Of that.
Onto the tool time, the big tool time.
Oh, we missed one.
Know what time it is?
We did miss one, but
screw it.
It was spring. We kind of talked about it.
Yeah, it's fine. It'll be in the show notes. Go check below. It's a wrap up of all the spring screw ups by Unit 42. So moving swiftly onwards. So do you have yours up and running?
Yes, I do.
So what do you think of Palo Alto? Willie just asked, hold on. What do you think of Palo Alto? I think I like to keep my job, Willie. That's what I think of Palo Alto. I think Guild 42 rocks for doing research. That was what I was going to reference there. Palo Alto are fantastic. They leave us alone. So huzzah. All right.
Actually, the Spring vulnerability write-up was from Palo Alto. So yeah, definitely make sure to check that out.
Yeah, we have a very cool research team. Hey, look, the StackRox community. Are you going to share your screen and show us what the real StackRox looks like? Because mine looks like a mess.
Yes, I can. Let me just make sure that I have it up. And
well, I can narrate while you're doing this, and I'll explain my journey.
Sure.
All right, and then you can correct my journey. So I have a 2-node cluster in GCP that I was working on, which is the one that I created for the CKS course, the Killer Shell course. I still had it up, and I thought, awesome, I'm going to jam some StackRox in there without reading anything, as you do. And I did actually. I went to GitHub as recommended by Mr. Foster and did the whole follow the directions thing. And it like actually, I mean, to give credit where credit is due, there was the bit where you had to like clone the whole repo, and I was like, ooh, this is a little drastic, right from the start, to put everything there. CD StackRox, I ran deploy. And I would say it just did its thing, with the exception that I was missing a bunch of the tools it needed to deploy. And it just kept bombing out after one another. But at least it said, you don't have this, so we can't run. I think like my first response would have been, put here like maybe some dependencies I need. But even then, optionally, check at the very beginning of the script to say, you're going to need blah, blah, blah. You don't have any of them, rather than partway through. The good news about the script, though, is that even though it bombed out like halfway through, third way through 3 or 4 times, I just ran it again, and it seemed to pick up where I left off, and everything was cool, and it worked, right? So that was good. Good news. And it like sort of deployed. What was wrong is that when I checked my pods, nothing was running. And I think everything was in 0 of 1. And I had a crash loop back off on some of the devices. Like the scanner was dead. I checked the manifest, and it needed to reference Quay.io, not Docker.io, because it wasn't there. So it just wasn't finding the container. So I manually changed that, thanks to you mainly, because you told me that they're in Quay now and not in Docker.io. So I did that, fixed it. It came up, and it was great. But then the only thing I really ran into after that was the minimum CPU memory requirements by default in every manifest meant that my cluster was nowhere near capable of executing the default install. Again, easily fixed. Having been an ex-StackRox employee and knowing what the minimum was, I modified them all and got it generally up and running. I got to kind of not quite where you are there, because I had remembered I'm supposed to go in and add a cluster so that it registers its existence. But because I was using a console in GCP, there was no way for me to get the cluster manifests that were generated.
So did you deploy locally?
No, I ran the deployment from a GCP cluster from like a terminal that had access. So I wasn't on my laptop.
Gotcha.
I didn't have a KubeCon config on my laptop for this cluster. I was using it remotely, like a little jump box kind of thing, right? Yep. And I deployed that. I then changed the service and exposed it so I could see it, made a node port. And then I had it up. And then from there, though, because it was only going to download the manifest to my laptop for the cluster, which my laptop doesn't have access to the cluster, not in a kubectl way. I need to get it onto the jump box, which means I needed a curl command, and that's where I got stuck.
Yep.
And then you told me you were already there. So
yeah,
hand me over to you.
Yeah. And let me go pull up the GitHub real quick, because we can talk about exactly some of the issues and some of the things that I'm changing. So first thing is, you get to this repository and it's big and bulky and there's a lot of stuff here, right? A ton of stuff. And there's a quick start, but the quick start's to build the application. And to me, the quick start is, hey, I just want to deploy this in Kubernetes. Tell me how to go. And it should this is how I'm visualizing it, is it's deploy, do it by script, do it by YAML, do it by Helm chart, do it by operator, right? With the different environments. And so you kind of click down, you go through it. again, each one is, here's the dependency. So for me, like the Docker is used to deploy, Docker has, the Docker container has rockctl and all of the dependencies associated with it, so that if you go and you want to deploy it to your cluster, you basically have your kube config, it's pointed at your cluster, it uses the container to go and deploy it. And it makes it so that at least when you are going to deploy and you're using your kubeconfig locally to do it, that you never run into dependency issue, a Go issue, a kubeconfig issue.
Ah, so I should have done that.
Yeah, so if you have Docker enabled and you just have Docker on, you don't actually, all you need is the kubeconfig that points to the cluster and Docker enabled, and it should work fine. Now, one of the other issues is there's one container, the monitoring container, that is for it's a Grafana Prometheus extension that I think one of the repositories hadn't been enabled. So there's an image pull back off. Now, that doesn't really affect anything in the environment. It's more just a plugin that doesn't work. So like just when you pop it up and you see an image pull back off, you're kind of like, is something broken? Is there an issue? No, but it's just an annoyance. It's just an annoyance. We'll flag it for a change. One of the other annoying things too is when you deploy it, you actually get this whole, and let me show you real quick if I can switch over.
I'm going to play a devil's advocate too. I want to ask you a question because I didn't
Go
even
ahead.
see where the container installation version was on the README or the quick start.
Okay.
Like where was that? Other than just running the deploy sh, I didn't see. I like the idea of there being a containerized run because then I wouldn't have run into any of those dependency issues. But I just didn't even see where that was. So if you can show it to me, that's cool. Otherwise, you may continue.
Don't you love it when it says all of a sudden, oh, it's like Google Chrome. I don't have, I can only share with Google Chrome in Google Chrome. I can't share my terminal. But when it's deploying, it's going through all of its, hey, deploying central, it's deploying all of the YAML files and all this stuff. What's really annoying is it tells you where to find the password.
Oh, yeah.
At the very top. And then goes and deploys everything. So you have to scroll through and say, oh, the password is in this location. And so now you're like, what do you mean in this location? And it's a password file that's been bcrypt and then base64 encoded, right? You've obviously run into this, Steve. So normally what happens is it's like either here, run this command to get the secret at the end, or it just says, set one beforehand. But what's annoying is because it's bcrypt and you're like, okay, well, where's the hash if I want to unbcrypt it? So then what I did was I was like, okay, well, I'll just go create a new one, pass that in as a secret, but it didn't pick it up. So I was like, okay, like restart the central. Nope, doesn't connect to the database anymore. So like everything has to go at once and there's no alteration after, which is kind of annoying. So then I just was like, all right, here it is. Click the password file where it says you can find the password here. If you just hit command, if you're in a terminal, you hit command and then you click it, it brings you right to the folder.
Yeah.
Life hack.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I did that and then I got in fine. It's just like the little things. There's almost been a standard set with Kubernetes applications that you're going through and you're like, I'm expecting this to happen right now. And it doesn't. And you're like, okay, now I'm confused. And it takes a little bit of time. You can get through it. It's just an annoyance. You know what I mean? And those are the little things that we flagged for a change, and small changes that will definitely be ready for KubeCon because we're really excited to basically just put on a bunch of demos and get people interested in it.
Okay, that's my next question. So that's part of the idea here is that you're doing this so that you've got this big open source launch for KubeCon.
It actually wasn't a launch for KubeCon. It was a launch to make sure that we had everything together, right? So, part of it is feedback, right? And, we can sit behind closed doors and say, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And then we launch it and everybody hates it anyways. And it's a waste of time. So it's like, hey, let's go out, let's see what people are using. Do they find it useful? Like I've run it on Azure, GCP, and EKS already. It's fine. And as soon as I got one going, then it was like boom, boom, boom. The next ones are real quick. Yeah, Red Hat Summit's coming up too as well in May. It's another big thing. Thanks, Lee, for the shout out. And it's hilarious because I got on the call with the engineers and I said, well, people who run OpenShift haven't had any complaints. Most of the complaints are coming from people who are deploying on XKS, right? Because it's not, and I was like, shocker of all shocks, and the engineering team was kind of like, yeah, it's been a year, and the integrations with OpenShift are like this. And so now it's like, hey, we're going to spend some time making sure that this is functional and works well with people's Kubernetes workflows, right? So that's on the way. But anything else that was your experience though too, right? Those little hiccups.
It just wasn't super fluid, I suppose, I don't know what I call it. Dumb stuff that I felt like tribal knowledge of having worked there got me through.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. And really, if you have to resort to tribal knowledge, it's not a great workflow, right?
It wasn't ideal, but and what was a little bit funny is that I do actually remember I was having a conversation today with somebody about ease of install and then ease of product use.
Mm-hmm.
And he was complimenting, I'm not going to stitch up a product, but he was commenting a product that was like so easy to install. Like, remember when we demoed Pixie and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so easy to install.
Done.
It's like blammo, it was in. And I thought, this is like, we could learn from this. And he did that. And he was like, wow, this is the easiest thing ever. And then he got into the product. He's like, I can't figure anything out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, StackRox was kind of the opposite of that. It's really I had all these problems trying to get it installed, and people had little hiccups. But actually, once you got it here, like where you are, I was like, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and for those wondering, like StackRox in 2008, 2009, 2020, Kubernetes native. I mean, when we used to work before we got bought up at Red Hat, it was like a very quick install, especially if you're doing like a proof of concept. When it was specifically around Helm charts and Kubernetes manifests, right? So it's just been a little bit of a change, and because it's open source now, you have double the efforts that are needed, right? So partially, you need somebody to go update the READMEs. Well, a lot of engineers are working on the paid products, so we were hoping that people would get excited, come to the engineering meetings, give us their feedback, introduce the README. Hey, here's how you deploy on EKS. Here's how you deploy on AKS, et cetera, right? So looking forward to those contributions. Now, yeah, let's talk about the actual product, because the installation can be have some hiccups, but the dashboard got a little bit of an overhaul, right, Steve? From what you saw last?
Actually, yeah, it looks different. It's not what I remember. And in fact, the colors, some of the colors are similar, but mostly it looked better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, light and dark. I was there during the hackathon when light and dark happened.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So I used my usual carts, weave socks deployment.
Oh, can I ask before you get started, right?
Yeah.
Seeing as you're showing this, if somebody there's a bit of the unclear, which I think. Oh, hold on. Waleed has a question. Okay, community meeting and URL also. Okay, well, we can answer that after.
Yeah, Waleed, there's the operator for OpenShift. If there's the free version, we basically just need to. There's work right now to make sure that we can just alter the operator to pick up the free version's images. But basically, you'd go into the operator and change the manifests to all the open source community images on quay.io. Again, that's like one of the things that we're trying to add to the README, but definitely an option because the operator and that lifecycle management is so nice. So the community meetings, it's a Zoom meeting. It's next week. If you follow the calendar, StackRox or community at StackRox.com, the open source meetings are all open. So you follow the calendar, and then if we make any changes or we have to move a meeting or something like that, you'll get notified. But we'd love to see you there, and I'll post it in there. And you can always ping me too.
Okay, is it StackRox.com or .io? Is that what you were saying?
StackRox.com. IO, we have StackRox.com and we have StackRox.io. IO just was the URL that we had for the website. Perfect. I
guess the question I was going to get to, what I wanted you to show, which I didn't ask you yet, I interrupted myself, was during the deployment instructions on the README, where I thought, again, sort of tribal bit, right? Which I knew what to do was, I got it past all of this and we're all good. And I had a StackRox login and I even knew where to get the password because I remembered it as opposed to where it tells you. And I was logged in, But the next phase where your cluster actually appears, I didn't see that on the README. Like one more paragraph to say you're almost there. Go to here, go to add cluster, and then it creates the next manifest for you. That little instruction, it's like it's not there when you log in, and it wasn't on the README unless I missed it.
It wasn't, and that's definitely true. So there's the OpenShift docs. So for Red Hat Advanced Cluster Security is all free. So if you got past the installation process, if you went over to the RHACS docs, all of the use cases apply to the open source version. That definitely needs to be articulated, right?
Okay, yeah.
Right, because the open source version, it's, hey, here's deploy on OpenShift, here's how you deploy with a Helm chart, blah, 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 blah. But really, we need to do the same thing on the README or in StackRox.io or something like that for XKS, etc. And then just point everything to that. I had a couple of people ping me like, it's pointing to the paid docs. Do people know that? It's like the paid docs are free, right?
Yeah.
So it's little things like that where people are expecting the normal differentiation between the open source and the other version. And it's like, it's the same product. It's just free. It's just in a different repo, right?
That's
yeah.
what's fun. What's funny is that we deploy at Bridge Crew, we have the paid docs, but we redeploy them into the open source repo so that they exist in two places. They're generated by the same thing just to get past the confusion.
Yes. So that was one of the moves, and that's one of the things that we were considering. Obviously, if you're deploying docs, there's a website associated with it, who maintains it, who upkeeps it.
Right.
So you have to make sure that the people who are managing the docs are on board with making sure that the open source version is kept up to date, right?
Cool.
So that's one of the considerations. Honestly, it's a great story of like what it takes to open source, right? So
Yeah.
if that's why I think you're starting to see too all these different communities and applications start open source, because all of those engineering considerations are built at the forefront, right? So you know it's going to happen. Whereas some companies don't necessarily think about it that way.
No.
Anyways,
All right.
we can always come back to StackRox. It's not like I'm going anywhere, so I don't want to drag this on too far. We're already almost at an hour, but typically you're going to get into StackRox, and it's a very Kubernetes-centric take, let's say. So you have your clusters, your nodes, violations, deployments, images, and secrets all listed out. Very high-level dashboard that you can start to configure now. I think there's a move to be able to change some of this stuff. I think in terms of the starting point for a lot of people, Steve, you're probably going to do vulnerability management at the base level, right? Scanning your container images, seeing your CVEs, what's fixable, what isn't, right? How many are affected? So this, you're used to this user interface.
Right.
There's an environmental impact. So you have a CVE. How many images is it in? Is it customer or is it, what's the word for it? Is it exposed? Is it behind, let's say, a network policy? All of these factor in to tell you how affected you are. And obviously there's a bunch of scores, critical severity. If it's fixable, it's going to be highlighted. If it's not fixable, it will show you the package. And basically you can choose if you want to take that container offline, or, you can do a risk assessment for your own sake. Everything is filterable. You have your deployments. The individual components can be listed out if I click on it as well. And you can see all of the vulnerabilities associated with this image, which is pretty cool. Right?
Yeah, I think when I used to demo it, everyone used to demo this differently. There was like, even though we had this ridiculously thick script, everyone ignored it. I used to like to go to risk, because there are a lot of packages, there are a lot of things that show you violations, or violations are very StackRox specific, the vulnerabilities. But the idea that there's a concept of risk in StackRox is something I always found very unique, and I still find unique.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that what is your number one, like catalog DB? Okay. So you click on your catalog DB, and because catalog DB is a deployment, from an operational perspective, a deployment tends to be associated with a team. And so you can start to create something that's more like a unique workflow. And this aggregates vulnerabilities, RBAC screw ups, reachability, like all those kind of other bits that you can attack, you can reach through other means throughout the platform. But for me, risk was like this place where everything was listed and it was done by deployment. So you knew What's my low-hanging fruit? What's my baddie catalog? All right, fine. It was cool. And that from that I still have not seen anything quite do that.
Yeah, I think that's why we tend to talk about this application as Kubernetes native versus container native or a container platform, right? There's a difference between, oh, these images are running and they have these vulnerabilities versus you have these YAML files that have specific structure to them, and they either they make the images more or less risky, right? Depending on it. I think partially one of the challenges when you're talking with customers is if they're not fluent in Kubernetes, they don't necessarily understand the risk of these YAML changes. They don't understand maybe the risk of mounting a default service token into a database container, right? So you have to articulate it, and that's partially what this is. It's a security tool. It's also an information tool to allow you to basically learn. And I think, let's say that your operations team is probably ahead of your security team when it comes to Kubernetes. And so it was a good way to sort of bridge that gap between the ops and sec teams. There's some better like workflow too. So let's say you have catalog DB, you have process discovery. If I want to view a graph, I can see like the timeline of a bunch of basically events that have happened. So I can export all of this. It's great for really drilling down and seeing what's going on in each container. And there are specific, you can track audit logs too. So if somebody says kubectl exec into a pod now, you can get notifications right away. So if you're in production and somebody's running those commands, it'll basically, you can choose to enforce it or not. This is one of those architecture choices that I think is really interesting for security tools. Some security tools will say, hey, we love runtime enforcement, but you can get a lot of false positives that end up kicking people out of containers when they're trying to debug and things like that. Kind of curious, what's your take on that? Using Kubernetes admission controllers and enforcing at runtime versus notifying and then taking the manual steps to shut things down.
Notifications are really tough to actually make actionable, as much as I'd like to think that that's the case. As much as we used to sell that, creating that workflow accurately at scale is super hard.
Yeah.
StackRox did have a notion of annotations where you can add emails to the deployments, and StackRox would then contact the associated annotation in the deployment when things went weird. I actually, that was a pretty cool way of doing it. The other option, and there's a huge camp of yes or no, I'd love to see a panel debate on it, was that StackRox can kill a container with an anomalous behavior or a deviation or a high risk moment, under the assumption, of course, that your Kubernetes is ready for such chaos theory engineering focused actions.
You better be very, very specific, and you better understand the impact of something like that, right? And I think the challenge too when you're talking about microservices is notify first, even if the goal is to enforce, to understand behavior before enforcing it. Yeah.
Baby steps.
And yeah, I think completely agree. And I think part of it is understanding what your applications are supposed to do, which is, I think, one of the major reasons why we added these baseline settings. So you can watch traffic flow between containers, say, hey, this is the expected behavior. This is unknown behavior. This is new behavior. And if you properly have instituted network policies, right? Like there's no network policy for this deployment. We can generate them. We can simulate them. If you've properly implemented the network policies, you really should only be allowing, probably at most 3 ports to be open. I've seen on containers at most in terms of accepting traffic, and that should all be known. Steve, one of the things that I figure that you would like is the first time that you come into the network policy after a refresh, hopefully it doesn't kick me out, it doesn't blow up anymore.
Woohoo!
Right? So sometimes we used to have these big clusters and the network graph can get massive, right? You're talking thousands of microservices. So pretty simple. If you want to look at all your clusters and blow up the network graph, it's on you now. It's not. So, yeah. Anyways, we're running a little bit over and I got to run.
That was good though. So it's very installable is the answer to that. If you want to take it for a test drive, do it, because Mr. Michael Foster at Twitter tag ideal username would love your feedback.
Yeah. And if, again, find us on Slack. We're in the CNCF Slack too, hashtag StackRox. Would love if you join the channel. Ping me there, comments, questions, concerns. It's starting to pick up. I think we have a pretty good amount of stars now. We're at 400. We're moving pretty fast. So look forward to the next couple months. And Steve, what's the plan? We're going to talk after KubeCon.
Yep, we're going to come back with version 2. V2, maybe a bit of a redesign, some thoughts. Give us some feedback. We can be contacted. How can we be? Does anybody ever contact us?
Twitter DMs, Slack. Yeah,
There you go.
it. And of course,
Gmail.
the YouTube comments, we'll always pick up on those as well. So
Yeah, totally. Connect us. See what you tell us. Tell us what you want to see. Tell us what you'd like to see from season 2. We've been kind of doing this formula. We got it pretty good, and but we'd really love some feedback. We'd love more people to get involved with the show. So yeah, we're wide open. Make it your show.
So yeah, the Thursday after KubeCon, we'll be back version 2. Be there. We'll wrap up our KubeCon takes. Steve, you're going to talk about the crazy Valencia stories. We get it. You're in Spain. You're cool. It's fine. I'm jealous.
Look at me. I never get to go to NA, so I have to make you jealous of my EU.
And because we have a couple months, if there's any demos, any tools that you want us to check out, let us know so we can line them up for version 2. Other than that, any final words?
Rolid very kindly says we have very rich content, but this one here, 2 white guys, maybe not that one there.
Not even that, 2 Canadians.
Yeah, no,
we're very...
it's super niche presenter requirements.
Yeah, that should go in the WTF section.
Okay, that's it. Signing off for V1 Cluster for this season. We'll see you after KubeCon. I'm Steve Giguere.
And I'm Mike Foster. And thanks for joining.